Have you ever noticed how sometimes arguing can feel kind of, well, pointless?
Oh, yeah, totally. Like you're just going around in circles and nobody's really getting anywhere.
Right. It's like a breaking record. But you know what's really interesting? In ancient Greece, they actually considered arguing, or rhetoric as they called it, a super important skill.
Really? Like a respected art form.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to explore today.
Cool.
We're going to use this book, Thank You for Arguing, to figure out how to, transform those frustrating fights into something way more productive.
Oh, I like that. Like how to actually get what you want at the end of an argument.
Exactly. It's like having a secret weapon for communication.
It's almost like a cheat sheet for being more persuasive, right?
I love that. A cheat sheet for persuasion. And that's what this deep dive is all about. We're giving you the tools to become a better communicator, whether it's at home, at work, or even just out with friends.
Makes sense.
So our guidebook for this journey is Thank You for Arguing by Heinrichs.
I've heard good things about that book.
It's fantastic, really engaging, funny, and insightful. Even Joseph Ellis, the historian, called it a timely, valuable, and entertaining contribution to understanding rhetoric.
High praise.
And Ben Yagoda, he described Heinrichs as this amazing mix of a seducer, a swashbuckler, and a stand-up comic.
Wow, that's quite a combination.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But what's really cool is that the book takes these old-school principles from guys like Aristotle and Cicero
Those are some heavy hitters.
and makes them totally relevant for us today.
So we're talking about taking wisdom from the past and applying it to our modern lives.
Exactly. And our mission today is to give you, the listener, some really practical strategies.
Yes. We want to help you understand what makes an argument effective, what makes it different from just a plain old fight.
Right, so you can actually persuade people and get your point across.
And maybe even avoid some of those pointless arguments altogether.
Exactly. So let's start with one of the most basic but crucial distinctions the book makes, the difference between arguing and fighting.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's the core difference? What should we be looking out for?
Well, when people are fighting, it's all about winning, right?
Yeah, like being right no matter what.
Totally. But a true argument, it has a different goal.
Interesting.
It's about winning over an audience.
Ah, so it's not just about you and the other person in the argument.
Exactly. That audience could be anyone, the people around you, a group you're presenting to, even the person you're arguing with.
That's a really good point. It changes the whole dynamic, right?
It totally does. It's not just about proving you're right. It's about actually persuading someone to see things your way.
I see. So it's less about combat and more about connection.
You got it. And the book actually brings in some really interesting research to back this up. Have you heard of John Gottman's Love Lab?
Oh, yeah, that rings a bell. Wasn't he the guy who studied married couples?
Yes. He and his team basically spent years analyzing videos of couples arguing.
Wow, they must have seen a lot of arguments.
I know, right? But what they found was fascinating.
What'd they discover?
The couples who were able to argue constructively, rather than just fighting destructively, those were the couples whose relationships thrived.
So it wasn't just about the topic of the argument, but the way they argued.
Exactly. And those couples were much better at, resolving conflict and staying together.
That makes a lot of sense. It shows how important this distinction is, even in our personal lives.
Right. It's not just some abstract concept. It can have real-world consequences for our relationships. So now that we understand the difference between arguing and fighting, let's dive into some of the actual tools that Thank You for Arguing gives us to become more persuasive. The first one is the power of concession.
Concession, isn't that like giving up?
It might seem that way, but it's actually a strategic move. It's about conceding a smaller point to win the larger argument.
I'm intrigued. So you're not actually surrendering.
Not at all. It's more like a clever tactic. The book has a great example about toothpaste and teenagers.
Oh, teenagers and arguments, that's a classic combination.
I know, right? So Heinrichs needed toothpaste and asked his teenage son, George, to get it.
And I'm guessing George wasn't too keen on that?
Not exactly. But instead of arguing, Heinrichs just said, you know what, you're right. You win. Now, would you please get me some toothpaste?
Wait, so he just agreed with his son?
He did. And guess what? George, feeling like he'd won, happily went and got the toothpaste.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
He got what he wanted by conceding a small point.
Exactly. It's like disarming someone by agreeing with them. It's a subtle way to shift the power dynamic.
I like it. It's like taking the wind out of their sail.
You got it. It's a really effective way to de-escalate a situation.
It definitely seems more productive than digging your heels in and refusing to budge.
Right. And the book actually gives another great example of this, using a potentially much more high-stakes situation, getting pulled over by a police officer.
Oh, wow. That's a stressful situation for anyone. How does concession work there?
So imagine you get pulled over for speeding.
Okay, I can picture it.
Instead of getting defensive and arguing about whether you were speeding or not, the book suggests you concede the officer's point. You could say something like, "Officer, you're absolutely right. I should have been paying closer attention to my speed."
So you're acknowledging their authority and admitting fault.
Exactly. It immediately softens their stance.
Yeah.
Then you can pivot by appealing to their expertise, maybe asking for advice on how to better monitor your speed in that area.
That's clever. You turn them into a helpful advisor instead of an adversary.
Yeah, exactly. And it often leads to a much more favorable outcome.
It's like turning a potential conflict into a collaborative problem-solving session.
You nailed it. And this brings us to the idea of rhetorical jujitsu. It's about agreeing up front, even if it seems negative, to redirect the conversation.
Okay, that sounds really interesting. Can you give us an example?
Imagine your kid wants unlimited playtime. Instead of just saying no, you can say, you're probably right. I don't let you have enough fun.
Wait, so you're agreeing that you're being too strict?
On the surface, yes. But it throws them off guard. Then you can have a more productive conversation about finding a balance between playtime and responsibilities.
Ah, I see. You're not actually giving in, but you're opening a space for a real discussion.
Exactly. And the same approach can work in professional settings. Let's say a coworker shoots down your idea. Instead of arguing, you could say, maybe that idea isn't quite there yet.
You're not rejecting their feedback outright, but you're also not giving up on your idea.
Right. You're inviting further discussion, which can lead to a more collaborative solution.
So rhetorical jujitsu is all about using your opponent's energy to your advantage.
Exactly. And this actually reminds me of a story you shared about being persuaded by your daughter at a restaurant in London.
Oh, you mean the Indian food incident?
Yeah. Remember, you wanted to go somewhere fancy, but your daughter insisted on this casual, low-priced Indian place she loved.
Right. And I wouldn't budge. I was set on that specific restaurant.
And you pretty much got your way, even though it didn't seem like it at first.
That's true. I wouldn't consider any alternatives.
You were pretty adamant about it. But by engaging in that back and forth about other options, you eventually agreed to her initial suggestion.
Yeah, you're right. I guess I conceded without even realizing it.
Exactly. You focused on finding a compromise, but ultimately landed on her choice.
So concession can be a really powerful tool even when we don't realize we're using it.
It really can. It's
Yep.
all about being strategic and subtly guiding the conversation. Okay, let's move on to another fascinating concept. The 3 core issues.
3 core issues. I'm curious.
This comes from Aristotle's framework of rhetoric. He identified 3 fundamental issues that pretty much every argument boils down to: blame, values, and choice.
That's interesting. Can you break those down a bit more?
Sure. Blame is all about the past, who did what, who's at fault. Values are about the present, what's right and wrong, what we believe in. And choice is about the future. What should we do? What decisions should we make?
So every argument, no matter how complex, fits into one of these categories.
Pretty much. The book gives some really clear examples, like, who moved my cheese? That's a classic blame question.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's about something that happened in the past.
Right. And then there are questions like, should abortion be legal? That's clearly a values debate. It's about what we consider morally right or wrong.
Okay, I get it. And what about choice?
A question like, should we build a new plant in Detroit? That's all about making a decision that will impact the future.
Ah, so identifying the core issue can help us understand the heart of the argument.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Arguments often go off track when people get stuck on the wrong tense.
What do you mean by wrong tense?
Let's say the goal is to make a decision about dinner. But instead of discussing what we want to eat, we start arguing about who left the chicken out last night.
So you're getting sidetracked by blame.
Right. Or we might start debating whether it's morally wrong to eat meat. We're getting stuck in values when the real issue is choice. What are we going to eat tonight?
I see. We're letting past grievances or present beliefs overshadow the future decision we need to make.
Exactly. The book gives another relatable example about arguing about music volume.
Oh yeah, I've definitely been in those arguments.
Who hasn't? Instead of focusing on the future, should we turn the music down? We get bogged down in the past. You're the one who turned it up. Or the present. Your music is always too loud.
So if we want to make a decision, we need to keep the focus on the future, on the choices available.
You got it. If you want someone to actually do something, keep the argument in the future tense. It's way more effective.
That's a great takeaway. Okay, let's move on to Aristotle's first mega tool of rhetoric.
Ethos. So we're talking about character, right?
Exactly. It's all about how you come across to your audience. Are you trustworthy, credible? Do they like you?
It's about building that foundation of trust so people are more likely to be persuaded by you.
And a key element of ethos is decorum. What exactly does that mean?
Decorum is basically the art of fitting in. It's about understanding your audience's expectations and behaving in a way that aligns with those expectations.
So it's about reading the room, so to speak.
Yes. It's about being aware of social norms and adapting your behavior accordingly.
So like if you're at a formal dinner, you wouldn't show up in ripped jeans and a t-shirt.
Exactly.
Oh.
Or if you're at a job interview, you wouldn't chew gum and slouch in your chair.
Right. You'd want to present yourself in a professional and respectful manner.
Precisely. The book actually has a great example of how a lack of decorum can really backfire.
Oh, I'm curious. Tell me more.
It's about a new editor who moved to a more conservative area.
Okay.
And this editor had a very politically charged bumper sticker on their car.
Uh-oh, I can see where this is going.
Right. Even though they had every right to express their views, that bumper sticker immediately created tension and friction with their new colleagues.
Yeah, it probably made it a lot harder for them to be accepted and respected in that workplace.
It totally did. Their lack of decorum undermined their professional credibility. It's a good reminder that how we present ourselves can have a huge impact on how others perceive us.
And how persuasive we can be.
Exactly. Now let's talk about another interesting rhetorical technique, aporia.
Aporia. What's that?
It's basically the art of feigned doubt. It's about expressing uncertainty or even admitting that you don't have all the answers.
But wouldn't that make you seem weak or unprepared?
Surprisingly, no. It can actually make you more relatable and trustworthy.
Really? How so?
By showing vulnerability, you come across as more genuine and less like you're trying to manipulate people. It also invites the audience to think alongside you, which can make them more receptive to your ideas.
So it's like you're inviting them to help you figure things out.
Exactly. And it can be a very effective way to build rapport and trust.
That's a really interesting technique. I'll have to try that sometime.
I think you'd be surprised how well it works. And speaking of changing social norms, the book also talks about how decorum is not static. It evolves over time.
That's true. What was considered acceptable behavior 50 years ago might be completely unacceptable today.
Absolutely. The book gives the examples of Senator Bob Packwood and Senator Al Franken.
Oh, right. Those are high-profile cases.
They were. And both senators faced serious consequences for behavior that was considered inappropriate, particularly toward women.
It's a stark reminder that we need to be constantly aware of how social expectations are changing and adjust our behavior accordingly.
Especially in today's world, where everything is so public and scrutinized.
Absolutely. Okay, what's next on our persuasion toolkit?
This one's called tactical flaw.
Tactical flaw. That sounds almost counterintuitive. How can a flaw be tactical?
It's about strategically revealing a weakness to gain sympathy or show that you're making a sacrifice.
So you're not trying to hide your flaws, you're actually using them to your advantage.
Exactly. It's about humanizing yourself, showing that you're not perfect.
That makes sense. People are often more forgiving and understanding of someone who's willing to admit their shortcomings.
You got it. The book has a really powerful example of this using George Washington.
George Washington, the first president.
The one and only. So during the Revolutionary War, some of his officers were threatening to mutiny because they weren't getting paid.
Wow, that's a serious situation.
I know, right? So Washington addressed his officers, and as he was pulling out a document, he fumbled with his spectacles.
Okay.
And then he said, "Gentlemen, you will permit me to put on my spectacles, for I have not only grown gray, but almost blind in the service of my country."
Oh, wow. That's a powerful statement.
It was. It completely disarmed his officers.
By showing his vulnerability, he reminded them of his own sacrifices.
Exactly. And it effectively prevented the mutiny. That's the power of a tactical flaw.
It's a really clever way to turn a weakness into strength.
Now let's talk about practical wisdom, or phronesis.
Phronesis. Well, what exactly does that mean?
It's about appearing to have good sense, sound judgment, and experience in practical matters. It's not just book smarts, it's street smarts.
So it's about showing that you know how things work in the real world.
Exactly. And people are much more likely to trust someone who seems like they've been there and done that.
It makes sense. We'd rather take advice from someone who's actually faced the challenges we're facing.
Right. The book uses Tom Hanks to illustrate this point.
Oh, I love Tom Hanks.
Me too. So Hanks said that if he needed a root canal, he'd prefer a surgeon who's done thousands of root canals, not someone who's just read about them in a book.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer.
Right. And it's the same with arguments. If you can show that you have practical experience in the area you're talking about, people are more likely to take you seriously.
It adds weight to your words.
Exactly. And the book also uses the Apollo 13 mission as an example of craft, that combination of knowledge and know-how.
Oh, yeah, the mission that almost ended in disaster.
That's the one.
Yeah.
But the astronauts and engineers were able to use their expertise and quick thinking to survive.
They had to improvise and come up with creative solutions on the spot.
Exactly. That's what phronesis is all about, being able to apply your knowledge in a practical and effective way, even in unexpected situations.
It's about being adaptable and resourceful.
And another tactic related to phronesis is taking the middle course in an argument.
How does that work?
By positioning yourself as the reasonable middle ground between two extremes, you appear more balanced and thoughtful.
So it's like you've considered all sides and arrived at a sensible compromise.
Exactly. It makes you seem more trustworthy and less like you're pushing an agenda.
That's a great strategy, especially when dealing with a polarized audience.
Okay, moving on to the third and final element of ethos, disinterested goodwill.
Disinterested goodwill. That sounds like a bit of an oxymoron.
I know, right? But it basically means showing that you genuinely care about the audience's interests, not just your own.
So it's about demonstrating that you're not just trying to manipulate them or get something from them.
Exactly. It's about building trust by showing that you have their best interests at heart.
How do you effectively convey that kind of goodwill?
Well, the book mentions the tactic of dubitatio, which is basically appearing hesitant or unsure about what to say.
Wait, so you're saying that expressing doubt can actually make you more persuasive?
It can. It might seem counterintuitive, but by not appearing overly confident or slick, you come across as more genuine.
It's like you're saying, I'm not trying to force my ideas on you. I'm genuinely trying to figure this out together.
Exactly. It shows that you're not just reciting a rehearsed script. You're actually thinking through the issue and taking their perspective into account.
That's a really subtle but effective way to build trust.
And the book also talks about the power of plain spoken language.
So it's better to avoid jargon and overly complicated language.
Especially when you're trying to connect with people on an emotional level.
Because it makes you seem more down to earth and relatable.
Exactly. It's like you're speaking their language, which helps build a sense of connection. The book even mentions George W. Bush and his famous Bushisms.
Oh yeah, he wasn't exactly known for his eloquence.
But people often found him relatable because his language was simple and direct.
It made him seem more authentic, even if it wasn't always intentional.
Right. It shows that you don't have to be a brilliant orator to be persuasive. Sometimes sincerity and plain speaking are more effective than fancy words.
So the key to ethos is not just about who you are, but how you present yourself.
Absolutely. It's about consciously crafting your character and adapting it to the specific situation.
Okay, let's move on to Aristotle's second mega tool, pathos.
Pathos, the appeal to emotions.
This one's all about connecting with people on a gut level, right?
You got it. Because logic and character are important, but emotions are incredibly powerful motivators.
It's like that saying, people buy on emotion and justify with logic.
Exactly. So if you want to persuade someone, you need to understand how to tap into their emotions.
And the book highlights one emotion in particular that's incredibly potent: nostalgia.
Ah, nostalgia, that warm and fuzzy feeling for the good old days.
But why is it so persuasive?
Nostalgia evokes a sense of comfort, security, and belonging. It reminds us of a time when things felt simpler and better.
It's like that yearning for a bygone era.
Exactly. And politicians and marketers often use nostalgia to their advantage.
Oh yeah, like that slogan, "Make America Great Again."
That's a perfect example. It tapped into a powerful sense of nostalgia for a perceived better past.
And it obviously resonated with a lot of people.
It did. It shows how nostalgia can be a powerful tool for connecting with people on an emotional level.
But the book also cautions that nostalgia can be a double-edged sword.
Right. It can sometimes romanticize the past and make us blind to its complexities.
He's like looking at the past through rose-colored glasses.
Exactly. So while nostalgia can be effective, it's important to use it responsibly and not oversimplify the past.
And what about other emotional appeals? What other tools can persuaders use to stir emotions?
Oh, there are tons. The book talks about appealing to deeply held beliefs, telling compelling stories using variations in volume and tone, speaking in simple and direct language, even strategically invoking anger or patriotism.
So it's about having a whole arsenal of emotional tools at your disposal,
Exactly. And knowing when and how to use each one effectively.
like a master craftsman.
The book also mentions this concept of cognitive ease.
Cognitive ease. What's that about?
It's basically about making things easy for your audience's brain to process.
So, like avoiding jargon and complicated language.
Yes, but it's more than that. It's about presenting information in a way that feels familiar, simple, and effortless to understand.
Because when things are easy to grasp, we're less likely to question them.
Exactly. It's like putting their brain on autopilot. The book uses the analogy of System 1 thinking, which is fast, intuitive, and emotional, versus System 2 thinking, which is slower, more analytical, and deliberate.
So cognitive ease is about engaging System 1, that automatic, effortless part of the brain.
You got it. And when you can do that, people are much more likely to be persuaded.
That's fascinating. It's like hacking the human brain for persuasion.
It kind of is. Now let's switch gears and talk about banter.
Banter. Isn't that just playful teasing?
It can be, but it's also a surprisingly effective rhetorical tool.
Really? How so?
Banter combines concession with wit and humor. It's about agreeing with someone, often in a slightly sarcastic way, and then delivering a clever retort that makes your point.
Oh, I get it. It's like disarming someone with humor.
Exactly. The book gives the classic example of Lady Astor and Winston Churchill.
Oh, that's a good one.
So Lady Astor supposedly said to Churchill, "If you were my husband, I'd put poison in your coffee."
And Churchill, being Churchill, had a brilliant comeback.
He did. He replied, "If you were my wife, I'd drink it."
That's classic. He turned a potential insult into a witty and memorable exchange.
Exactly. It shows how banter can be both entertaining and persuasive.
It's about being quick-witted and using humor to your advantage.
Another interesting technique is the backfire.
The backfire. What's that?
It's about deliberately exaggerating your audience's emotions to gain sympathy.
That sounds risky.
It can be. It's like intentionally overreacting to something to make people feel sorry for you.
So it's like a woe is me routine.
Kind of. The book gives the example of the author exaggerating his reaction to a comment his wife made.
Did it work?
In that specific case, yes. But the book warns that this technique doesn't always work, especially in formal or political settings.
Yeah, it could easily backfire and make you seem weak or manipulative.
It's definitely a technique to use with caution.
Okay, what about commonplace and framing? Those seem like important concepts.
They are. Commonplaces are basically those shared beliefs and values that everyone in a particular culture or group agrees on.
So like common sense or conventional wisdom.
Exactly. And persuaders can tap into these commonplaces to make their arguments more relatable and convincing.
It's like speaking the audience's language.
Exactly. And then there's framing, which is about strategically shaping how an issue is perceived.
So it's about controlling the narrative.
You got it. It's about choosing the right words, highlighting certain aspects, and downplaying others to influence how people understand the issue.
Politicians do this all the time, right?
They're masters of framing. Like, instead of calling it an estate tax, they call it a death tax, which evokes a much more negative emotional response.
It's all about choosing language that will resonate with your audience.
Exactly. And the book also mentions this sneaky rhetorical trick called metastasis.
Metastasis, like the spread of cancer.
Well, it's kind of like that, but in a rhetorical sense. It's about trying to avoid an uncomfortable topic by shifting the focus or redefining the terms.
So it's like trying to distract people from the real issue.
Exactly. The book uses the example of Mr. Burns from The Simpsons, who refers to a nuclear meltdown as an unrequested fission surplus.
Oh yeah, that's classic Mr. Burns. He's trying to downplay a serious situation by using euphemisms.
Exactly. And it's important to be able to recognize this tactic so you're not fooled by it.
It's like a verbal sleight of hand.
And then there's definition judo, which is about strategically defining key terms in an argument to your advantage.
So it's like controlling the dictionary.
Kind of. It's about making sure the definitions you use align with your values and your position.
The book gives the example of egghead versus educated.
Right. Those words technically mean the same thing, but they evoke very different connotations.
Egghead sounds negative, while educated sounds positive.
Exactly. And that's the power of definition judo. By carefully choosing your words, you can subtly shift the entire perception of an issue.
Okay, let's move on to logos, the appeal to logic.
Logos, the realm of reason and evidence.
What are some of the key tools we can use to make logical arguments?
The book highlights 3 types of examples: factual, comparative, and anecdotal.
Can you give me an example of each?
Sure. A factual example would be using statistics or research findings to support your claim. A comparative example would be drawing an analogy to illustrate your point. And an anecdotal example would be sharing a personal story or a hypothetical scenario to make your argument more relatable.
So it's about using a variety of evidence to support your claims.
Exactly. And then there's the enthymeme.
Enthymeme? That's a new one for me.
It's basically a shortened syllogism that relies on a commonly accepted belief or value.
So it's like using a shortcut in logic.
In a way, yes. It's about tapping into what your audience already believes to make your argument more persuasive.
The book gives the example of someone arguing that they'd rather vote for a more honest politician, even if they have the same stance on taxes.
Right. It's based on the assumption that honesty is a desirable quality in a politician.
And most people would probably agree with that.
Exactly. That's the power of an enthymeme.
And what about logical fallacies? Those are the pitfalls we need to avoid, right?
They are. And the book mentions several common ones, like the all-natural fallacy, the appeal to popularity, the false analogy, the fallacy of the antecedent begging the question, and the Chanticleer fallacy.
Wow, that's a lot of fallacies.
I know. It's important to be aware of these fallacies so you can spot them in your own arguments and in the arguments of others.
Because they can lead to faulty reasoning and ultimately weaken our arguments.
Exactly. But here's the interesting thing. The book suggests that in rhetoric, sometimes logical fallacies can be used strategically.
Wait, so you're saying that it's okay to use fallacies sometimes?
Oh, well, not exactly. But remember, rhetoric is all about persuasion.
So if a fallacy, even if it's logically flawed, effectively persuades your audience, it might be considered a legitimate rhetorical tool.
It can be, as long as it's done ethically and doesn't completely undermine your credibility.
That's a really interesting point. It shows how rhetoric is different from formal logic.
Exactly. Okay, let's move on to kairos, the art of timing.
Kairos. Is that like seizing the moment?
It is. Kairos is about recognizing the opportune moment to make your argument.
Because even the best argument can fall flat if it's delivered at the wrong time.
Exactly. It's like telling a joke at a funeral. It's just not appropriate.
So how do we get better at recognizing those kairos moments?
It's about being attuned to your audience and the situation. Notice shifts in mood, changes in circumstances, and look for those moments when people are most receptive to your message.
So like waiting for the right moment to bring up a sensitive topic with your partner?
Exactly. Or knowing when to pitch an idea to your boss when they're in a good mood.
It's about reading the room and striking while the iron is hot.
And kairos is not just about timing, it's also about choosing the right medium for your message.
Ah, so it matters whether you communicate via email, text, or face-to-face.
It totally does. Each medium has its own strengths and weaknesses.
The book has that funny anecdote about the Jumbotron blunder.
Oh, yeah, proposing marriage on the Jumbotron at a sporting event.
Not exactly the most romantic setting.
Is a classic example of choosing the wrong medium for your message.
What are some other insights about different communication?